2030.
Saudi Arabia, the point of investment fund,
It's a
there's a
big
lot of
vision.
excitement
It's
around
transformational
NEOM specifically.
change. Every aspect of the kingdom, economic, social, cultural, religious.
The 2030.
This is the 2030.
Yalla, 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 yalla.
This is the 2030. Hello, Dr. Hanaa. I'm calling you Dr. Hanaa because you're a PhD and that's part of your title. But I'm not going to do that every time if that's cool. I'm just going to call you Hanaa. That's all right.
That's fine. That's what my family calls me.
Okay, cool. How are you? How's everything going?
I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. Do you still have, you have a magic 8-ball? Is that right behind your head? You have it right there.
It's right here.
I
do have a magic 8-ball.
That is so wild. Okay, first of all, why do you have that? I haven't seen one of those in 20 years. Is that like a new thing you have? Or?
Well, because life is unpredictable and it's nice to get all sorts of different sources of information.
Well, do you use it ever? Are you let's ask it something and see if is this going to be an amazing episode of the 2030? It's in English, right?
It is in English. What? It's like, I can't read it. Better not tell you. I don't know that sounds
so
like
that's that's not good. Yeah, no. That's not good. So either it knows and it doesn't want us to know it's going to be bad, or it knows it's going to be great and they just want us to execute. So maybe that's the thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do they make
basically those it's like wait and see how incredible it's going to be.
Yes, I think obviously I think that's what it's going to be. Do they make those in Arabic? Have you ever seen one of those in Arabic?
I have not seen a magic 8-ball in Arabic. So if our it's basically a pool ball, and then there's a little screen at the bottom. I don't think you can see, but there's a little thing inside. You have to have it facing up.
It has to face up.
There's blue liquid, and then it just goes to the surface, and you can read the answer.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, I don't know if I love the answer it gave us, but I think because I'd like a absolutely bet on it, or bet the farm. I don't know what the other responses are, but
they're not all very good. I think we're good with this one.
Okay.
This is a good one.
We've got a great one this week. Let's jump right into our deep dive. Hanaa, you're going to be leading us off on this one. What are we diving deep into this week?
So I'm really excited, actually, because my deep dive this week is talking about an interview with His Excellency, the Minister of Finance, Mohammed Al-Jadaan, also known as Abu Faisal. So I'm talking about an interview he did on the podcast called Sokrat, which means Socrates in Arabic, with Omar Al-Jadaan. And I love the interview for multiple reasons. First of all, Al-Jadaan said that it was the longest interview that he'd ever done on the show. But what they did is they kind of traced a lot of the financial developments and decisions from 2015, when His Excellency was actually still the head of the Saudi Capital Market Authority. And then they kind of traced it into today and thought kind of deeply about some of the issues, kind of going year by year, the challenges, the key points of contention between some of the plans, how they were received by Saudis on the other end, and the public. And I really am happy to bring this up for two reasons. First, because this is going to be something that I do regularly, listening to some Arabic content and discussing it on the show. So I'm happy to be able to do that today. But also, I think it's really important to highlight that there is a dialogue that's happening between decision makers and the public. And Al-Jadaan raises some key complaints and points of tension that arose from introducing things like VAT, delays in payments to the private sector, how digital platforms were kind of created difficulties and bottlenecks for people with government contracts. And Al-Jadaan was really addressing these head on. He wasn't avoiding any of these topics, and Al-Jiraisi was really presenting them. And there's also a segment at the end of the episode where they do a Q&A from the public, like people had sent in their questions ahead of time. So I think it's really important to show that there are multiple channels of communicating with officials, and podcasts are one of those. So are TV shows and interviews on TV as well. So I think there's a couple of points that I just want to pull out from the interview. One of them is about introducing VAT instead of income tax. There was a question about that, like, why did you choose to introduce VAT? Why is it so high? And one of the reasons was that if they did VAT, it would be in line with other GCC countries. So there was kind of this fiscal policy alignment that was happening, and that was important for Saudis. So they didn't want to go completely off, and do something different to the rest of the neighboring countries. And also, I think there was a really big point about how even if VAT might be difficult for some people because of, low income families, struggling to pay for kind of basic goods and services, now that there was a sudden value-added tax to these things, they really did kind of highlight the importance of the Citizens Account, how, the Citizens Account it's a national program that was established to protect families from these types of direct, indirect, and unexpected as well as expected economic impacts and that result from reforms. And so there's this provision of cash transfers deposited directly into the accounts of citizens who are beneficiaries of the Citizen Account program. So even if there was a sudden introduction of value-added tax, there were there's a safety net, and there was kind of social policies that would alleviate that for people that would struggle. But the importance of VAT was really how it carried Saudi through the shocks related to COVID, especially overcoming kind of deficits, balancing the budget, and really being able to respond to the economic challenges that resulted from a very unexpected global event. I think the point was that it's not going anywhere because the world is still experiencing a lot of turmoil, inflation, geopolitical challenges, global wars, energy prices that are still unpredictable. So it's necessary to keep the policy going, and that VAT is here to stay most likely. The other thing that I really wanted to talk about that he brought up, which was interesting, was how basically there's one of the vision programs is the National Center for Privatization. And this program, according to Mohammed Al-Jadaan, is one of the programs that is criticized as not going according to plan. There's perhaps maybe too many initiatives. And the National Center for Privatization really is an effort to get the private sector involved in a lot of projects that would traditionally be public sector government-run projects. So in 2021, Al-Jadaan had said that through this program, the kingdom would aim to collect about $55 billion, which is 200 billion riyals, to enhance revenues and reduce the budget deficit. And he actually on this podcast stated that he's confident that this number will be reached as they're now on the right track. So it's criticized because it's taken a long time to set up, but now they're on the right track. And actually, most of the initiatives and most of the projects would be really long-term. They needed really, really clear regulations. It's 16 different sectors that are involved, which can, basically launch their own kind of private initiatives, where the private sector could either be partners or take over completely, from things that range from human resources, municipal services, logistics, social services, environmental ones, health, electricity, and so on. So some of these are also multi-sector projects. And it would take at least 2 to 3 years to set each one up in terms of planning. But now in 2023, at least 60 contracts were signed. And now that those kind of foundations are set, it's never been closer to launching in the proper way, according to Al-Jadaan. So, the idea is many government entities will be corporatized. This is the first step. It's necessary to put the framework and the structure in place, and then most of the contracts will be partnerships with private sector. But there are apparently hundreds of millions of riyals in opportunities that are now available for people to bid for and invest in. So you highlighted some key achievements of companies that did privatize, the Saudi telecom company, STC being one of them, but also airport in Medina. Public hospitals all have dialysis centers that are now privately funded and run. The ports are privately run as well. So services have improved through this privatization, and this is, again, just the beginning. And there's never been a time when there has been this much confidence from the private sector, from the financiers, from the investors and the banking sector as well. And I just wanted to end kind of and wrap this up by noting that Al-Jadaan is very positive. He's realistic. He talks about the challenges, but he wants to stress that there are so many positive opportunities. And despite setbacks and challenges, it's really important to focus on what's gone well, and the outcomes of the policies, are really unfolding now. And we are seeing why sometimes things that were hard to swallow, that were not necessarily easy, have resulted in a much improved situation financially. His approach is very transparent and long-term. And I think that came across really well in the interview.
So first of all, this is a very important segment that you're doing, that you're offering as a service to, well, me first, because we're talking, but then all of our listeners and viewers, because you're elevating something that just won't be seen or won't be heard unless it gets randomly picked up by Reuters or Bloomberg. And even then they will take a couple of comments from it and put it in English and say, he said this on an Arabic podcast. What we're doing with this segment, by we, I'm taking some credit, it's you, elevating a interview or a conversation or something that's in the Arabic media that is just going to be missed. And I feel like that's a huge service. So kudos to you, and thank you to you, Hanaa, for doing this, because this is stuff we just won't hear unless you do this. So that's important. My first point in response, I just wanted to say that to start off. Secondly, on Mohammed Al-Jadaan, there are very few, and I'm actually struggling to think of anyone else that knows the Saudi economy better than Mohammed Al-Jadaan. And this is not just because he's very close to His Royal Highness the Crown Prince and the King, or he's involved in pretty much every important meeting involving the economy of Saudi Arabia. It's because he also has been doing this for at least a decade, 15 years plus. He's got an amazing track record. First of all, he's not purely a financier. He's a commercial lawyer, and he started his career off as a commercial lawyer and co-founder of Al-Jadaan and Partners law firm. Then he became Saudi Arabia's Minister of Finance in 2016, which was 9 years ago. And he also served for a while as Minister of Economy and Planning. So he's really like just right there at the center of what we're talking about with this podcast in general, which is the economic and social transformation of Saudi Arabia. And often those things are two things that go hand in hand, right? So it's like VAT, you talked about that. That's something that's an economic program, but it's also a social program, because all of a sudden people are paying more than they would be paying for something, and that makes it a social issue. And I remember very well when Saudi Arabia rolled out the VAT, and then it was 5% at the time, and then they jumped it to 15%, 5 to 15%, and that was July 1st of 2020, so peak COVID. They were just like, hey, everybody, VAT is going from 5 to 15%.
It was really sudden.
Yeah, and people were used to the VAT at that point. The increase was felt, but there was also, and it made some headlines, but people then ran to stores to buy all the TVs and Xboxes and everything they could get their hands on, because they were going to buy those things, and they were like, we better get it before this price comes up. Yeah. And now it seems like people are not, it's not that they're not affected by it, but it's that they're used to it and that it's a reality of life. And that's very hard to do if you're a government or if you're a policymaker, to put a policy in play and make it part of life. So that's interesting.
And stick with it, right?
Yes.
I think that that's a really important thing that he was talking about is, people are not necessarily going to love the effects of building a safety net. But if we don't build it, the outcome will be much worse. And so you're going to have to adjust your expectations and your lifestyle to some degree. But there are other programs that are in place that are trying to enhance your opportunity to make money, your opportunity to grow and upskill and, continue to improve your livelihood. So I think that that's also really important to note. This didn't happen on its own.
Yeah, absolutely. The other point that I want to make about Al-Jadaan is that he's not just a commercial lawyer and he's not just a government official. I mean, he's had 2 of those top government official postings, finance and economy and planning, but he also was chairman of the Capital Markets Authority.
Exactly.
And he oversaw the opening of the Tadawul Stock Exchange. And he oversaw the loosening of Saudi Arabia's regulatory framework to open it up to foreign investors. Yeah. So he has also this experience in the capital markets space and investment. And he understands very deeply that you can tie these 2 things together. Like if you want to have foreign investors coming in, you need to have certain things about the economy be just so. He has done a few interviews recently. That's why this was so interesting for me to hear about from you, that have made some news. Like in December of 2023, he was the first to really come out and say, hey, you know what? Like some of these exact deadlines we have for Vision 2030 are not going to be exactly what we said they were at the beginning. Some of them will be faster. Some of them will be slower, but that's just sort of the nature of the beast. And when he came out and said that, I remember reacting at the time, well, that just makes a ton of sense, right? I mean, like it's a 13-year, 14-year plan when it was first announced. Of course, these things are going to change a little bit. He also discussed in that interview Project HQ or Riyadh HQ program and how they were sticking with it. So my whole point, I guess I'm making here, is that he really knows what he's talking about. So to be able to hear what he was saying in this Arabic interview that I hadn't heard of, I didn't hear any of this, by the way, is really quite valuable.
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting. There's definitely kind of sound bites that are picked up by the media, and there are interviews that are done specifically for people that are outside of the kingdom. But I do think that it's just as valuable to hear how Saudis are reacting and thinking about these topics and where their concerns are, because again, like you might be thinking, what does this mean for FDI? What does this mean for people coming in and investing? But, a lot of Saudis are listening to this thinking about like, are they going to take VAT away? Is income tax on its way, right? And those are the types of things that people really do want to hear. And the more personable our ministers are, and the more they are in the public eye and speaking about these things, the more trust there is. And I think, you just mentioned how close he is to the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, the king. That was how the intro of the podcast started. It was just kind of like those first conversations on nominating him to be the Minister of Finance and how inspired he was by the depth of knowledge and the breadth of coverage that Mohammed bin Salman has, and how deeply connected everything is in his mind, that he was like, I was hoping to retire, but there was no way I could say no to taking on this position with somebody that is so invested in the future of this country. So it was really interesting to hear that part as well.
That's amazing. I didn't know that. That's really cool. By the way, this is a formal invitation for His Excellency Mohammed Al-Jadaan to come on to this podcast and discuss with us anything he likes. Same with His Royal Highness the Crown Prince, by the way. It's interesting when you were talking about that. It makes me think of, and we have a little tiny clip of it in the intro segment drop to every episode we do, but the interview that the Crown Prince did with Brett Baier on Fox News really changed a lot of people's minds about him, because he was so intelligent and so such an effective communicator about all of the different questions that Brett Baier asked, and they weren't softballs that he was asking. And it was honestly just impressive to see His Royal Highness handle these questions the way he did and kind of demonstrate that he really is super interested in, super invested in, and very passionate about the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So just really cool. And the other thing that he does is hire very good people. Like His Excellency.
No, Absolutely. And this is something that His Excellency Al-Jadaan was talking about as well, was it's all about the team, right? Well, it's two things that he said that I think are really interesting about the Crown Prince and kind of the vision. One of them was about the team and how he was given like the opportunity to hire and train and kind of just basically recreate the Ministry of Finance. But then he was also talking about when you're talking about just like little elements, like digitizing or whatever, little thing was not little, right? It was a massive part of the restructuring of the ministry. But when you're talking to the Crown Prince about these things, he'll be like, yes. And you can link that to, I don't know, the Ministry of Tourism's digital platform that's doing this. So those two can directly, and he'll pick up like layers deep into some of these strategies of the different ministries, how they're interconnected. And it is definitely his talent, right? He knows all of it inside out.
It's amazing. So thank you for sharing that with us, Hanaa. We're going to have a link to that interview, which it's another podcast. We're going to put it in the show, wherever you're seeing this. If you haven't heard it yet, give it a listen. Let us know what you think about it, or if there's anything we didn't talk about that you think it was worth mentioning. We're going to read it in a subsequent episode. We've talked about this before, but you can email us both directly. You can actually email an email handle that says hosts@the2030.com, or you can email either of us directly with any feedback. We're going to always see it, sometimes read it on air. So let us know what you thought of that interview and if there was anything that you thought was interesting. Because I thought that everything you were saying, I was like, well, this is like basically what you're doing is almost reporting news as a reporter would do in the West, saying, oh, they did this in Arabic and this is what they said. I'm done for the week for my original journalism piece. But I thought that was fascinating. Thank you, Hanaa, for that. Okay, Hanaa, let's get to the news. Everyone's talking about it. You might have heard, but Saudi Arabia says it did not participate in intercepting Iranian attacks on Israel. This is obviously a major incident in the region. Everyone's looking at it very closely and hoping for calm and peace. But Iran launched over 300 missiles and drones into Israeli territory earlier this month on April 14th. It was a retaliation for an attack on the Iranian consulate in Syria, in which several Iranians were killed, including two high-ranking officials. I believe they were generals. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as of recording this podcast, the West has really been urging Israel not to respond to avoid an outright regional war. Israel may still retaliate. It's still unclear how that would unfold, what that would mean for the region. It's all been condemned quite heavily by Saudi. The messaging remains very, very clear by Saudi Arabia. The priority is an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and an unhindered access to aid and basic human services for Palestinians.
Yeah, I mean, you know, where we are right now in the region, it's amazing how important it was that Saudi Arabia and Iran reestablished their ties diplomatically. And at the time, I was on record as saying, I don't think this is going to last. These two powers have been just absolutely incredible rivals in every region in the theater. So how are they going to manage this ceasefire? Like, isn't some little, flare up going to jeopardize it all? And here we are more than a year later, and it has stood the test of the last year, which has been a tumultuous year in the region. And it's never been more fragile than it is right now. So it's interesting that happened. And one has to think about what would happen if they didn't do that. And I have been thinking about that. Just interesting.
Yeah, it is definitely a really difficult time in the region. Geopolitical instability continues to, become more unpredictable. So, we're all praying that hopefully the hostilities do subside, It's already been over 6 months since the October 7th attacks in Israel. And until a ceasefire deal is reached, that includes the release of Israeli hostages, until you do get more aid into Gaza, and until you start talking about the next steps, I think it's going to continue to be very tense. So
this is not an overwhelmingly political podcast. It's all tied together. So we will talk about things like that. But we both feel very passionately that there must be a ceasefire in Gaza now. There must be the return of the hostages now. I wish there were something that I as an individual could do to make it happen, because it's something that I am very passionate about. And it's absolutely heartbreaking what is happening there. Yeah. So it's obviously all related into what we're talking about now with the launch of these missiles and the potential for an retaliation again, which would be undoubtedly an escalation in something that is already spiraling out of control. Absolutely. And Gulf Arab powers, the United States, the West, even Asian powers have failed in creating a ceasefire in Gaza. And I just want to say that my personal opinion is I want to see that yesterday. I want to see it 6 months ago. I want it to be over. So, if we can't use this platform to talk about how we feel, what are we doing? So it's my opinion, but that's what I want. So,
and to the occupation really is what I want, and I've grown up with the Palestinian cause my whole life. So it's something that is, deeply touching, difficult to talk about sometimes. I've always been in a room full of people that say, ooh, it's really complicated. Let's not get to that. But I think that, actually what's happened since October 7th, 2023 is that we can talk about it a little bit more and can be a little bit more vocal about it, which is a good thing. But I also, like you said, want to highlight that that's not really kind of the type of thing that we hope to be talking about that much on the podcast. Hopefully we can find that it is going to take a turn for the better, inshallah. I want to say that despite the regional tensions, the Gulf states really are thriving at the moment. And there still is a lot of dedication to social cultural dynamics within each Gulf state, within Saudi Arabia. And there's still a lot of positive that's coming through in Saudi. And I think that some people criticize the Gulf states for continuing, but this is a really important time for a country like Saudi Arabia to continue with its economic agenda, with its cultural agenda, with its social agenda. And I think that that's really important. While we do take a moment and really talk about how important the geopolitics are and the region is struggling, we still also are continuing to celebrate the achievements that are happening inside the kingdom. And so I'm pivoting really far with this next piece of news.
Big old pivot.
Huge pivot. But I wanted to say that it's also a regional thing, which is great. So there's a 4th Gulf Cinema Festival that's kicking off in Riyadh at the moment. Yes, so it's the Ministry of Culture's Film Commission has brought together the who's who in Gulf cinema in a 4-day event in Riyadh. I love it because it's Gulf-wide, right? So there's been a lot of things happening inside the Saudi cinema scene, but here you're looking at the rest of the 6 Gulf, or all of the 6 Gulf states. The event is going to screen 29 films, including feature-length short films, documentaries, but also a series of dialogue sessions and training on filmmaking and telling stories and how you can really create documentaries, how you can find financing for your film, and music composition and so on.
Yeah, Prince Badr bin Abdullah bin Farhan. And you kind of giggle every time I pronounce something. I'm gonna get better when we do these Arabic words, which we will do before the show is over. Yeah. I'm gonna work on my pronunciation and offline, of course. The Minister of Culture noted that this edition of the festival represents a crucial milestone in cultural cooperation among the GCC countries and embodies our leadership's commitment to enhancing collaboration among us. I mean, this going from no cinemas and film effectively banned to be seen in public to hosting the 4th Gulf Cinema Festival with 29 films, kind of like a little mini ideas festival and really a great networking event for people in this space, that's a huge turnaround for the kingdom, and it can't be said enough.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's some great films that are being shown that are Saudi grown as well, right? Or Saudi made. So you have like The Night Courier, which was this thriller drama that was directed by Ali Al-Kaltami, who's one of Saudi's most prominent filmmakers and has actually been producing and creating content for years on YouTube before full feature films. So, I think that that's pretty cool to have that be featured as well.
Yeah. Very cool. And this is in addition to the Red Sea Festival that they're doing. This is in addition to the Saudi Arabia's first real submission to Cannes that's coming up. And not too long of a time. We did talk about that in a separate episode. It's just very exciting what's happening in the space. It's still nascent, and which means it's still a great investment opportunity. It's still a huge place for a huge opportunity for growth. And I know that the government is working on this very hard because this is one of the elements of diversification that is generally the subject of the show, which is absolutely really cool. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I again, living in the Eastern Province, would drive to Bahrain for the weekend to go buy movie tickets and watch movies in Bahraini movie theaters. And we don't have to do that anymore. So this is definitely part of the diversification project. And it's obvious that people are now buying movie tickets to watch movies in the kingdom. They are consuming foreign and locally produced films inside Saudi Arabia. So I think it's, again, there was a lot of bootlegged VCRs kind of tapes that were circulating when I was a kid, and now you can actually just buy the movie on your Netflix account and watch it at home. So it's great. It's definitely different.
I wish there was a way to short movie theaters in Bahrain before the film ban was revoked in Saudi, probably in a similar way that one wishes they could short the bars and nightclub space in Bahrain if Saudi Arabia ever goes in that direction as well. But similar deal. No comment from Hannah, I'm sure, on that. Nope. Let's talk about a man almost as handsome as I am, Mr. Cristiano Ronaldo, who is looking down the barrel of another suspension for the famously hot-headed superstar during the Al Hilal versus Al Nassr quarterfinal of the Saudi Super Cup. Of course, every listener and viewer of this show knows about this in Saudi, but outside of Saudi, he landed quite an elbow on defender Ali Al-Bahlahi. Sorry again, pronunciation. Thank you. Got a red card. Looks like he got 2 games. I don't know.
I don't know that it's happened yet, but there's definitely, yet again, it's a bit of a recurring theme with him, isn't it? Like he seems to have anger management issues.
Do we hold on? Is this an unbiased comment, or do we have an Al Hilali here talking? No,
I support Al-Ittifaq.
Okay, so but either way, you're not like a Ronaldo guy.
I am not a Hilali or Nasrawi. I don't support either one of those teams.
I saw those two play. It was actually pretty good sport. Still trying my best to get into soccer. Al-Fayha is not very good still. I got Chelsea that you don't like.
No, I'm an Arsenal fan.
You would be. I don't even know what that means, but I'm just saying you would be. I think it's interesting too, Hannah, his last suspension, he was fined $8,000, which is like one of 100 watches he owns. So, and not even. So I feel like that's kind of when you define slap on the wrist, $8,000 for him. I don't know if that,
Well, the suspension, I think, is the issue, right? Because and Nasser, they depend on him being part of the team at the moment, and he keeps getting suspended. Like the last one was for some obscene gesture, so he wasn't it wasn't violence on the pitch, but he was violent to the audience, to the supporters, to the fans, and I think We really need to. I know. I mean, honestly, again, I do watch English football, and I am an Arsenal fan, and I see what happens in all stadiums and with football games and soccer games, whatever you want to call them. Just sports events can turn violent, but yeah, Ronaldo's. He's joined in Al-Nassr following his exit from Man U in 2022. He scored 14 goals in 16 league appearances last year and is a top scorer in the league for the current campaign with 22 goals in 20 appearances. Like, people love him. He's a great footballer, but he needs to control his anger so he stops getting suspended.
He's super passionate. I like how he had a little bit. Yes, it is. He had a little bit of a foot injury, I think it was last month or the month before, and then he went to the new Ritz-Carlton in the Red Sea. Is it Ritz-Carlton? No, St. Regis. Sorry,
no, it's St. Regis.
Yeah, and I was just like, man, that place. Again, we may have discussed this already, but put us. We will do a show from there. Bring our families. That'd be so sweet. But it looked really cool. And I think they've gotten their money's worth from having Ronaldo jolt the Saudi Pro League to international prominence. It's just an opinion, but yeah, interesting.
Yeah, no, well, that's the thing, though. Like, football is a huge part of the vision. It's a big part of the economic development plans, both by buying, teams abroad, but also in having players come into the kingdom and really developing this huge infrastructure for young people to get into sports and learn kind of how to play football professionally through the academies and through all of the Olympic committees. And there's just so much going on with sports. It's really great for young Saudis and aspiring young Saudi homeowners. So I think that leads me to the next piece of news, where Sekeni, the vision program that offers affordable housing options for people through financing and support in financing, released that in Q1, 25,391 families purchased their first home through Sekeni. The program was founded in 2017 by the Ministry of Housing and the Real Estate Development Fund, and it aims to increase home ownership to 70% by 2030. It targets first-time house buyers with financial assistance of either 100,000 or 150,000 riyals.
This is cool. It's a big part of what Saudi Arabia is doing in general. Sekeni, it's Sekeni, not Sekeni?
Sekeni.
Sekeni announced that more than 100,000 families benefited from the initiative in 2023 and all of 2023. That's a lot of Saudi families, right? I mean, they already have home ownership levels at 67%. That's not far from where they want it to be. So that's good. For Vision 2030, it's 2024. So that's very positive. But you also have an issue of affordability, as you do everywhere. But man, in Riyadh, is it getting crazy? And it's not just Riyadh, right? It's all over Saudi, but Riyadh really is the most important. As people know, we have a regular real estate contributor joining us every month on the 2030, Faisal Durrani. We're going to ask him, and we can ask him anything, which is great. I'm going to ask him a little bit about this, but this is a complex space, and yeah, I mean, but this is an important program that Saudi is doing with Sekeni, making it so that Saudis can afford their first home. It's the most important thing in your financial journey as you become an adult, is if you can get to that first step, every subsequent step after that gets easier. So cool.
Yeah, looking forward to really having some more in-depth conversations with Faisal about this, because there's some really interesting developments that are happening in the space, like with having the golden visa scheme and having people coming from abroad wanting to buy property in Saudi Arabia. There will definitely be a shifting dynamic there. Thinking about what kinds of homes people can afford. Are they going to be buying apartments? Are they going to be buying standalone homes? Are they going to be buying, bigger family homes and that kind of thing? I think these are all really interesting questions that speak to some of the social shifts that are happening and people moving from their cities to Riyadh, people maybe moving back to cities of origin as well, people retiring on farms, and all sorts of interesting things that might be happening. So, or having second and third properties as well, once you can eventually afford that, what that means, keeping a property in your kind of city of origin and then having a property in Riyadh. I've literally spoken to people recently that are like, oh yeah, we now have an apartment in Riyadh because so-and-so works there, and so we need to have that. It's something that's happening more often. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. You also have the challenges of home ownership, though. I mean, we talked about rain and have talked about drainage and flooding a lot, but that then brings into the discussion homeowners insurance and general insurance against things like that. When you own a property, especially, you are responsible for taking care of it. And if there's a natural disaster, there's nothing you can do. So, this is fascinating. You also have Saudi Arabia as, and Riyadh specifically. I keep sort of tying the two together, but I'm most familiar with Riyadh. 25th on the Smart City Index, which is cool because it sort of means that these properties that people are buying and places that people are choosing to live are becoming globally attractive. I mean, it's not just they have to do it, it's that they want to do it. And that's, it's interesting.
Yeah. No, and IMD, the Institute for Management Development, have a lot of different indices for how attractive cities are. The Smart City Index is one of them, but then there also are other ones that really just look at the overall livability of cities and how attractive they are. And Saudi's definitely, the aim is to become one of the top 10 city economies globally. And Riyadh is aimed to be one of the top 10 city economies globally, right? So this is something that we've heard from the Riyadh strategy, which I don't know whether or not it officially launched or not yet, but it's something that, has been spoken about quite a bit in the media. And so I think that that's interesting to think about. There is a big effort to make it an attractive city on the global level. So it's not just for Saudis that are coming from other parts of the kingdom, but it's thinking about health and safety, mobility, governance, outdoor space, and then all the other infrastructure, transportation, recreational spaces, and so on and so forth. So I think there's a lot going on there.
Yeah. And kind of putting a bow on it, we've talked a ton about rain, drainage, flooding. We are going to talk a little bit more about it from a cloud seeding standpoint. Obviously, the thunderstorms, torrential downpours of late all across the region have sort of highlighted the work that governments are doing in cloud seeding around Saudi Arabia and in Dubai to create regular rainstorms that water plants. And it's a pretty interesting technology. And that really got brought into the spotlight in the aftermath of the floods because everyone was saying, well, did they overseed the clouds and accidentally make it a little too much rain? It's just an interesting topic. I wanted to kind of do a quasi-news conversation about this at the end to wrap it up because I feel like people are still going to be talking about this and there are going to be conspiracy theories on this no matter what people say.
Yeah, I mean, I think the denial came also partially from the science, which is basically saying that, it's cloud seeding is there to enhance kind of rainfall at times of the year when there isn't a lot of rainfall, but it's very humid. So you do get rain this time of year normally, and it's not a humid time, but you need more rain in the summer and kind of like the early autumn months when it's very, very humid, but then that humidity is just kind of getting trapped in the air. So apparently with cloud seeding, a lot of the efforts along kind of the Red Sea coast in Saudi, natural conditions really lend themselves to better rainfall because it captures that humidity and turns it into rain. Basically when you have more water vapor, the cloud seeding works better. So I think that this probably wasn't that. I kind of agree with the denials. But again, I'm not an expert in cloud seeding. I think it's fascinating. And to be able to really, kind of encourage rain when it's really dry in times of the year, I think is really important. So.
Whatever happened to the suggestion of dropping a nuclear weapon into a hurricane? Wasn't that actually floated as something that was seriously considered possibly by Trump? Like when these hurricanes were starting to bear down on Florida. I'm going to look that up. If anybody knows anything about that, email us.
Honestly, that sounds like a Trump
like something he
suggestion.
might do.
I don't think that we should be dropping nuclear weapens anywhere. I'm a big fan of non-proliferation.
You're not a big nuke gal.
Agenda. Not a huge, no. Not especially in light of kind of some of the other news we were just talking about. With, kind of geopolitical tensions and ongoing wars. So yeah, I'm not a big nuke fan.
I think on that incredibly silly note that I have led us down to, Saudi Arabia taking a $1 billion stake in a Pakistani mine. Saudi Arabia is moving closer to a potential deal to acquire a minority stake in a Pakistan mine controlled by Barrick Gold Corporation. This is according to people with knowledge of the matter who told Bloomberg, one of the better publications in the West that covers Saudi Arabia on these matters. Manara Minerals Investment Company, which is backed by a tiny investment fund called the PIF, plans to invest at least $1 billion in the Reko Diq copper and gold mining project. Is that how I say it? RAKODIQ? Anyway, I don't know.
Not familiar with it.
Well, okay. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
We're off to a great start here. Yeah.
So obviously, the foreign minister has been in Pakistan for a while on an official visit, and so this clearly is, an interesting thing to talk about after that visit. But I think Manara Minerals Investment Co. is a PIF company. It may invest more over time. There's been an uptick in Saudi-Pakistan relations in recent months. Aside from Faisal bin Farhan, the foreign minister, visiting on official business, the kingdom has been among the key backers of crisis hit Pakistan, which is now struggling with depleted reserves for some time. There, diplomatic relations between the two countries go way back. In mid-April, the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman met in Riyadh with visiting Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif as well. So there's definitely been an uptick in the relationship, or at least a more visual one recently.
Yeah, when the PIF says that it has 93 or whatever it is investments now to date, or like companies that it owns or manages, is a company like Manara Minerals Investment Company listed in that? Because I feel like every now and then we'll hear about a new investment vehicle that it uses to make investments in a space. And they just set one up for sports. They had another one that they used to buy a stake, I believe it was in Lucid, and then to reinvest in Lucid recently. So I wonder if these little sub-holding companies that they have are included in that, or if that's more for these other companies. Anyway, interesting. I'd never heard of this company, Manara Minerals Investment Company. I wonder if it has a logo and if I can get a golf visor or something. I feel like it'd be pretty cool. But yeah, this is interesting to watch. I mean, Saudi Arabia obviously sees in Pakistan an ally and a partner that is struggling a little bit right now economically, which creates investment opportunities for Saudi. The two are very close. So just kind of interesting. And speaking of financing, see, I think what we do here, and this is cool, we can kind of work on our transitions. By the time we get to episode 1000, our transitions are going to be so seamless. People are like, wow, you guys are natural, do it with your eyes closed.
It's these two pieces of news are in no way related, but you've managed to weave them together somehow.
And actually, see how bad I am? Because it's your transition to make, not mine. And I just agree. So we're off to, see, we can only go up from here. So
yeah, no, that's fine. So yeah, as you were saying, what was it? I don't even remember what your transition was.
I was saying, speaking of financing.
Financing. Well, yeah, no, that's a good transition. So Saudi Arabia's NEOM is raising debt financing to finance the Giga project. Saudi's NEOM is planning its debut Real bond sale for later this year, reports Bloomberg, citing people familiar with the matter. And the Giga project is looking for more sources of funding for the $1.5 trillion worth of construction projects it plans for the futuristic city. The Sukuk issuance may take place later this year, according to Bloomberg.
Yeah, I'd really like to be a person familiar with the matter. Like, I like when they use that phrase, people familiar with the matter, that these people know, trust us. We are reporting. We don't want to use their names for obvious reasons. Look, I mean, who saw this coming? Maybe a lot of people. It's what Al-Jadaan referred to earlier. I guess you should say later in 2023. But, you know, NEOM is going to make some adjustments along the way. And financing NEOM, especially as originally designed, not originally designed, but, you know, as currently planned with the 109 kilometer long the line, and then all of these actually amazing resorts that are starting to pop up. I mean, it just was never going to be cheap, right? And so Tim Callan, somebody that I know who works for AGISW, it's a think tank in DC, he really knows the PIF well, and all sovereigns well. He kind of knows it from the outside looking in, but he knows it as well as you can know it. He put the number at $270 billion for NEOM to fully realize its ambitions. I don't know. Does that even seem low? That seems a little low to me, but that's what they need. So he thinks they need. So look, they're going to be doing these Sukuk issuances. They'll be doing bonds and debts. They want investment. That's key. And to get investment, they got to keep going. So yeah, interesting.
Sukuk are kind of bonds, right? Like they are. It's
yeah.
basically an ability to invest in companies. And I think that people are excited about being a part of that growth. So I think it's not, I think it also speaks to the appetite that people have to be part of some of these bigger projects. And you can get like institutional investors and individuals kind of being a part of the growth, which is great.
Yep. Yeah. So wandering back from NEOM to the shore across I got a really sweet map of Arabia, like from 1812 or whatever. I can't even see it. So I can't even do the transition well. This is, okay, look, we're doing transitions. We're learning. Again, we're going to get good at it. But next news item is Marriott is tapping into Lawrence of Arabia for help me pronounce this, Nujama? Is that
Nujuma?
the new Nujuma? Okay, Nujuma, which is a new super awesome resort, a Ritz-Carlton Reserve. Marriott International has dressed one of its top general managers as Lawrence of Arabia, T.E. Lawrence, in a photo shoot to promote its new resort along the Red Sea. Nujuma, which is a Ritz-Carlton Reserve, is expected to be the most expensive hotel ever operated in Saudi Arabia, commanding rates of more than $3,400 a night when it opens on May 26th. This is according to the travel publication Skift.
Wow. Well, I'm excited. Honestly, the Red Sea resorts, as you mentioned, just look phenomenal. And so according to Skift, in a new promotional video, multi-property general manager Tony Coveney is seen crossing the desert and collapsing on the beach. Did you just say this?
No.
I was looking up Nujuma. I lost track of where we were.
No, but I was using a wandering back from NEOM back into across the desert.
Wait,
yeah.
Did you tell me that he collapsed or was he just wandering? No. So yeah, apparently, and this is ridiculous, but like he has this found identity as a sheikh, speaking to the main theme of Lawrence of Arabia, the historic epic based on the life of Thomas Edward Lawrence, which was once banned across the Arab countries, but is still a film that a lot of Westerners refer to when they think about Saudi Arabia. And it's like a really... what year was it based? It was in the teens,
50s,
wasn't it?
Yeah. It's the film?
Earlier. Yeah. Well, it was released in the 50s, but it was based on the historical time. I want to say late 1800s, early 1900s.
No, right? Because the film is based on his role in World War One, I believe.
Was it World?
I've seen it twice. I think it's World War One.
It's the longest movie in the whole world, though.
But it's got that great symphony and Peter O'Toole with his super blue eye. I mean, it's just iconic.
Yeah.
They actually they do have it on Saudi Netflix now, which is kind of amazing. But yeah,
was it World War One? So It's just like I remember watching it and them talking about Faisal and me thinking that they were talking about King Faisal, so thinking it was like based in the 60s, but actually that was Faisal of Jordan. So it was a very different, and again, watching it when I didn't know enough about the history of the region when I was younger didn't help, because then I never really rewatched it until I think my kids rewatched it not long ago.
I love it. It's one of my favorite movies.
They joke about
it is
watching
World War I, by the way.
Before bed. Is it okay? You're right. They joke about watching it before bed. I'm like, it's bedtime. They'll be like, oh yeah, can we just watch some Lawrence of Arabia first, because it's such a long film. So anyway,
it is a long film. It even has one of those old school transitions in the middle where like, hey, go up and use the bathroom and go get some popcorn. We're gonna get the symphony out here.
An intermission.
Come on back. We're gonna go to Cairo. Yeah. So actually, I don't want to talk about this anymore with you.
Okay, we're gonna talk about it.
No, because I want to do a deep dive on this movie at some point in the future for a rainy day in August when there isn't a ton going on, because I love this movie and I want to do a chat with you on it.
I need to pull out. I wrote a paper about it when I was in college. I need to pull that out.
Pull that thing out. Yeah, you don't have to do any prep. You already did it, right? You got the paper.
I will just read the paper. I don't even know. I don't remember. Clearly, I remember nothing. I don't even remember when it was set. So anyway, but I think it was more about the film and Peter O'Toole and anyway. Moving on. Go ahead.
No, I just sometimes use quotes with my boys, that he says oh, it is written, it's anyway, we're safe. Sorry. No, you had a nice transition. I ruined it. I'm sorry. So that's my fault again.
I don't know that I had a nice transition. I'm just going straight into the IMF boosting Saudi's economic growth forecast to 6% by 2025. So this is good news. Was it 6 or was it so basically the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, has revised its expectations for Saudi Arabia's economic growth, projecting a robust expansion of 6% by 2025. This represents an upward revision from the earlier forecast 5.5%. That's where I had the lower number in my mind, made earlier in the year. However, the IMF also noted a slight adjustment in its outlook for 2024, with the kingdom's output now expected to grow by 2.6%, down 0.1% compared to the previous prediction.
Yeah, oil economy is always massive in Saudi and still will be until Vision 2030 is fully realized. But then you must look at non-oil economy as indication of how quickly and how reliably, dependably that they're diversifying. And the World Bank is bullish, one could say, on the non-oil private sector, 4.8% during the current year. And this is on the back of expansionary public finance policies, right? So it's the government stimulating the non-oil private sector, but that's all good. Just keep that growing and growing and growing as robustly as you can. And they're doing that. So this is a good report from the IMF. There are others that do these sort of reports on the economy. They do little projections. Obviously, the government does their own. They release it at the end of the year and at the beginning of the year. And we'll see. This is good news, though. I mean, the Saudi economy is doing well right now. Hannah, thank you very much.
Thank you.